Hi, I'm Greg Adamore, your host for Keen TV's Experts of Southern Nevada. I'm the real estate coach, and today I'm very pleased to bring in a well-known attorney specializing in real estate here in the Las Vegas Valley, Mr. Kyle Wallace. Today we'll talk about a lot of issues, short sales, mediation, what's happening with the banks, and Kyle, pleased that you could come in today, and could you tell us a little bit what a short sale is?
Yeah, well, thank you for inviting me, Greg.
My pleasure.
I'm happy to be here. A short sale is an interesting concept. It's something that's been around actually for quite some time. The concept is that the bank agrees to take less money than they're owed and eliminate a mortgage.
I see. And is there liability that follows the homeowner with the short sale, or is that also one of the things that's negotiated?
Well, it's certainly one thing that's negotiated. It varies by state to state. Some states don't allow it. Some of the states surrounding us, California, Arizona, don't allow the banks to pursue it all. In Nevada, we have a little bit different rules, and they allow the banks to come after people for that shortfall that they've agreed to write off.
Oh, I see. And so if someone were to enlist your services and advice, would one of the stipulations of the short sale be that there be no deficiencies to the homeowner? Would that just be a clause that's put into the agreement? And of course, and is that binding?
Absolutely. That's one of the beauties of a short sale, is that ultimately the homeowner gets to decide what they want to do when they see all the terms on the table. Unlike some of the other options, when in a short sale, you work with the bank, you go through the process, they come back with their agreement, and if it doesn't match the terms that they're willing to move forward on, then they can just opt out of moving forward on it.
I see. And then suppose a short sale, say one of the lenders asks the seller to say, we're willing to forgive the debt. We'll write it off. But we'd like a $5,000 cash or a $20,000 promissory note. Is that something that the homeowner has to accept, or can they appeal that, or can they continue to negotiate? Perhaps they don't have the money to bring in. Is that something that's negotiable also?
It is absolutely negotiable. It's going to depend on the overall circumstances of that seller. But you'd say everything in a short sale is negotiable. Okay. You can push the bank on how much cash they have to bring in, if at all. Most of these short sales right now are going through without cash from the seller, without promissory notes. But in circumstances where they deem that they do have sufficient financial wherewithal to give a cash contribution, then you would certainly want to work on the bank as to what the amount would be. You don't want to settle for the first thing that they're going to offer to you.
Okay, so let's say there's a Mr. and Mrs. home seller calls me as a realtor, or calls you as an expert in real estate, and says, listen, we have about $10,000 or $20,000, which is our little nest egg. Maybe they're getting older like a lot of us, and they want to do a short sale, but perhaps they're afraid that the bank will take that money from them. What strategy can we discuss with a person in that situation that really is upside down in their home, but what little wherewithal they have for their own retirement, or just how do we go about protecting that asset?
Well, there's a number of things you can do. Of course, qualified retirement accounts. You can prepay some things. You can deal with the income. That's generally not a concern. There are transactions where people have liquid cash, but if they're showing that they're going negative every month, or they're having to dip into that cash to continue a mortgage, and they have a good financial hardship, the bank's probably not going to ask for any money. So there are a number of cases where you don't even have to deal with those monies in their accounts. But if it's a situation where it's an employment transfer, or it's a death in the family, or some other circumstance that's going to lead them to do a short sale, and they do have some cash, the likelihood is that the bank's going to ask for some money, in which case then you'd want to maybe put some of the money in an IRA. You might want to prepay for kids' schooling if you have that. You might want to just do something with those assets before you approach the bank.
Can you gift it to a relative, or is that in some cases allowable?
Now, in some cases it is allowable. There's generally better things you can do than that, but of course that could be an option.
I see. And you mentioned hardships, and I mentioned in the previous shows that hardships are an important thing, and there are financial hardships, but I understand now there are other hardships beyond. You mentioned relocation, maybe taking care of an elderly person or a disabled child, or something along those lines. So they accept hardships that are not just financial, but job relocations you mentioned.
They absolutely do. You know, when people think of short sale, they think, I don't have the ability to pay for my house. And that's really what we'd say financial hardship is. And that's what drove the short sale market for some time. Some of the major banks and lenders or underwriters, such as Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, they came out and said, we'll allow short sales too, that are not financial hardship related. You know, and those are death, divorce, distant employment transfer. You know, a good example is if you have stairs in your house and you have a bad hip and you can't get up and down those stairs, you may have the financial ability to pay for that house, but it's not reasonable for you to stay there anymore. The banks will allow you to move forward on a short sale because you have a bad hip and stairs.
It seems like short sales are going to be here for some time. I've heard different statistics, sometimes up to 60 or 70% of Southern Nevadans are upside down in their homes. So I guess it is an opportune time, really, now that they've extended the Mortgage Debt Forgiveness Act. A lot of the viewers aren't aware of that, but according to the Mortgage Forgiveness Debt Act, that they can sell their home and have no negative taxes or no tax liability from the IRS. My general understanding, I'm not an accountant, is that they give a 1099-C, and that C stands for canceled debt. So before, when debts were forgiven, whether it be a credit card or a car loan or a home loan, the IRS considered forgiven debt income. So no longer is that's no longer a worry for, I guess, the end of 2013.
Yes, I would qualify that. I would say, to clarify this, forgiveness of debt, like you said, is income. And the easiest way to think about this is, you know, a family member gives you $1,000. And a month, you know, and you agree to pay them back, and a month later they say, you know what, you don't have to pay me back. You are $1,000 richer than you were the day before.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Same thing works with mortgage debt. The difference is you don't see the money, right? It goes from the bank to the title company to purchase the home. But when they write off that debt, what they're saying is you're now maybe $100,000 richer, which could be bad news in tax circumstances. Now, you know, what that means is if you're going to have a tax liability on an additional $100,000, that could be a substantial amount. But the government has said, hey, we're going to allow you to write that debt off. We're going to allow you to, you know, get out of that obligation if it's your primary residence and you do, you know, a sale or a sale in lieu of foreclosure or foreclosure by January 1st, 2014. What that means essentially is, hey, you know, it has to qualify for primary residence, which is that you have to live there for at least 2 of the last 5 years, normally 12 months consecutively. You can't have used the house as part of a business and rent it off. And there's some other qualifications, but if you fit within those parameters, then there is no tax liability on your primary residence. Now, the one key I'm going to say is you always want to talk to your accountant about these things.
Oh, absolutely. And I think it's great that we can talk about the steps of a short sale. And initially, for someone who's just new to hearing the short sale, maybe they're upside down, they're watching today, and they're thinking, well, you know, I didn't know if this is help. They've got a lot of information. Perhaps they've been contacted by their own bank saying, hey, you're behind, or they've received a notice of default. What's the first step? I mean, should contact an experienced real estate agent, an experienced real estate attorney, and discuss their situation before they make any move, because a lot of them are worried to talk to the banks, because the banks, when they call, the first thing they say is, this is a debt collector. They disclose that we're here to collect the debt. All information could be used for that purpose. And then they say, oh, we'd like to help you. How about we do a loan modification? And, you know, what would be the steps, let's say, first step, second step, if you could walk someone through, you know, the steps of a short sale?
Absolutely. You know, the steps of a short sale, the most important thing is, and I say this all the time, and that is, no bank will allow you to do a short sale unless you're represented by a real estate agent. Right? So at some point you need to talk to a real estate agent. Some people will need to talk to a real estate attorney. Not every case is a case where they need legal representation. Now, they may want it at the end, but ultimately you have to have a real estate agent to process that through for you. You know, the other thing is, when you're talking to a real estate agent, they're going to know about some of the things you'll need to do to get it done. They're going to know about, some of the modification programs. They're going to know about some of the mediation programs, some of the foreclosure rules. And of course, while they can't give you legal advice, they can certainly direct you to the people that you need to speak to.
Okay. So once we've got a qualified realtor, and there are realtors that have expertise. I was one of the first people to be certified nationally as a short sale expert in Southern Nevada, and we're trained now. And I think one of the good things that the viewers can do now is get with a realtor, get these debts resolved, get the hardship established. And we have usually a package that we give the homeowner, which some of the title companies provide for us. And I know over the last several years that you personally have helped me with a lot of my clients and give us assistance. And I've been trying to get you on the show for a few months. I really appreciate you coming in. But you mentioned a kind of a buzzword in the industry, mediation. I understand there's been some changes recently in the mediation rules. Can you talk a little bit about mediation?
Absolutely. The mediation is the right of a homeowner to go meet with their bank and try and work out a deal when they're facing foreclosure. So what happens is, a home goes into default, or the homeowner hasn't paid for some certain amount of time. I would say, hey, normally it's a minimum of 60 days, could be longer. Once they file that, the bank files a notice of default, the homeowner has 30 days to opt for mediation. If they don't opt for mediation, then they lose that right. But what mediation is going to do is allow you to sit down with someone. It's probably going to be the attorney that represents the bank, and they may get someone on the phone. But you can work out the terms of how you're going to move forward, whether the bank can foreclose, whether they'll agree to a short sale. You can work out the terms right then. I have worked with people specifically who went to mediation and got the bank to agree to a price that they would allow the sale to go through at.
I see.
That's unusual.
Right.
Most times they'll say, yes, we'll allow you to apply for a short sale and we'll postpone the sale date, and they'll allow you to move forward, but they won't give you necessarily a price. But in those circumstances, this person was given a price and we were able to do the short sale at that price, which actually turned out to be a very good market price.
Right. Yeah, I understand that's one of the things they're discussing at mediation now, is that they can offer short sale prices, and during the mediation too, it does stop the foreclosure process during the, by a homeowner maybe 2, 3, 4, up to 5 minutes by the time they file the mediation and you attend it. And I'm also told by some folks in the legal industry that maybe 2 out of 30 people come with all the documentation, that they have to have everything there in order to proceed. So if there's a lack of preparation on the bank's side when they show up, that they can stop the foreclosure process and start all over and initiate a new notice of default, a new NOD. So I don't know if that's part of the new rules. I know there have just been some changes recently. But it's great that they are setting prices and discussing, in some cases, principal reductions, or taking some of the payments that were in arrear and putting them on the end of the loan. And I think some of the folks that go to the mediation, if maybe they'd love to keep their home, but their incomes went down, or they're maybe just getting back to work. So all those things are brought at the table. And would it be wise, or it's not, I guess, not required that the homeowner bring an attorney, but a lot of homeowners are enlisting the expertise of an attorney at the mediation. Do you appear at mediations for clients if they need your help?
I have done some mediations. I would say it's highly advisable that they bring someone with them. There are rules in place as to what documents the bank has to produce, and what form they have to be in, and they have to present those at the mediation. If they haven't presented those at the mediation, they are negotiating or participating in bad faith, is what they say in Nevada, right? And that means, they haven't taken the necessary steps to show up and do what the law requires them to do. So having someone there with some expertise that can look at a document and say, hey, this is an improper assignment, or this isn't an original like you need, you can shut down the mediation right then. Now, it doesn't allow them to go back and file a new notice of default right away. At that point, their right to foreclose non-judicially has expired, if they don't produce the proper documents, which means they would have to move forward with what we call a judicial foreclosure, which is substantially more expensive, more time consuming, take a little bit more expertise, and so the banks have usually shied away from that. meaning, if they don't bring the proper paperwork to a mediation, it can be several years before they're able to move forward on a foreclosure.
What are some of the consequences? Say we successfully help a homeowner short sale their home, get that burden off their back, they have no deficiencies, there's no tax liabilities. What consequences with their credit? When can they generally buy another home?
Well, I would say, consult a lender on that. Obviously up front, like I'd say, consult an accountant for tax issues, consult a lender for credit issues. But the key is that after a short sale, there's no set time period that it's going to take you to get a loan. The question is, how much do you want to put down and what's your interest rate going to be? So the day after you do a short sale, and you'll see advertisements out there, buy the day after. Well, you have to have a good down payment and you have a pretty bad interest rate. But when you talk about normal or conventional financing, what you'd say is the normal waiting period on a short sale is approximately 2 to 3 years.
Right. Yeah, I've seen some of the second chance financing in the paper, and generally it's 20-25% down, 10-12%, but you have the ability to prepay that any time without a prepayment penalty in most cases. So also there's homeowners that can do short sales that are current on their mortgage at the time, but I understand there's a new rule for Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac that requires you to be 31 days late before you can even initiate the short sale application. Is that correct?
That's correct. The changes are when it's a financial hardship, right? We talked about hardships earlier. Financial hardship means I don't have the ability to pay my mortgage because I don't make enough money. When it's a financial hardship, they've said for anything that's owned by Fannie Mae, anything that's owned by Freddie Mac, or anything that's an FHA loan, they require you to be 31 days late on your mortgage. The problem that you run into is nobody can advise you to stop paying your mortgage. Right? Attorneys can't tell you to stop paying your mortgage. It's a legal obligation. Real estate agents can't. Nobody can say, stop paying this mortgage. So you may be in a situation where you're looking at a short sale. You have a financial hardship. You're dipping into your savings to pay that mortgage every month, and the bank is just dragging this out month after month because you're not falling under those required 31 days late.
I see.
So it's something to be aware of, and it's a regulation that people need to know coming into a short sale.
Absolutely. Investors as opposed to homeowners, a lot of them are under the impression they can't do a short sale. Is that correct? Or can the investor who owns 4 or 5 rental properties and they're upside down, they can also do a short sale?
They most certainly can. Short sales for investors have become much more friendly by the banks. For a while there, you couldn't do it if it wasn't your primary residence. There were programs available to people in their primary residence that weren't available to investors. Those terms have now changed, and a lot of the programs are available to investors across the board. There are, when we talk about some of the hardships that people face, one of those is excessive use of credit. If you're an investor and you have multiple properties and you've been overextended because of it and it's affecting your ability to do other things, you can qualify for a short sale, right? The key with short sales is you have to have some hardship, be it financial or legal or medical. You have to have a hardship to move forward. So as long as you have that hardship, even if you're an investor, you can move forward on the short sale.
Okay. What's the consequences, say, a short sale versus a foreclosure? And why is a short sale preferable to just walking away, not opening the mail, and hiding your head in the sand and just pretend it didn't happen? I mean, what's the differences between the consequences of the foreclosure versus the short sale, if you will?
Absolutely. The thing I will say is there have been times that I have advised people to let a property go to foreclosure. That has been far and few between. They have to be very specific circumstances for people to qualify for that. The real difference between a foreclosure and a short sale is the ability to get credit in the future. And it's that simple. If you do a short sale today and you go buy a car, you can still get the highest credit rating from some of the major lenders. If you have a foreclosure, you're going to get a terrible interest rate, right? The other thing is the foreclosure is going to bar you for about a year longer from getting a conventional loan, right? It damages your credit. if you have a security clearance, if your job requires a security clearance, if someone has to check your credit for a job, foreclosures are very damaging, right? It can actually, if you have a foreclosure, it can, prevent you from renewing or getting your security clearance.
I see. Military and high classified jobs with the government or police work, perhaps, all those things would have a bearing on the future of your employability.
Absolutely.
So foreclosures are probably the last thing that you want to do, especially now that it's so friendly to the short sales with the way we've streamlined the process. And I think there was a big learning curve over the last 5 or 6 years. And I'll tell you, it used to be like pulling teeth without getting any Novocaine, and it's becoming, there's more educated. We're getting, I know you teach seminars throughout a real estate community. And I think that with the learning curve, people are learning to streamline the process. The banks have more people working, and typically when this first started several years ago, when the bubble broke, we found these people were undertrained, overworked, underpaid, and just overwhelmed. And I was talking to people on the phone sometimes for hours, and I think they didn't have the clue. They never owned a home. These are people that just got to work out of a different department that were collection agents, and they just, you just really had a mountain of paperwork, and people were losing the paperwork. So I think right now we can offer the homeowners upside down a great deal of hope, legal consultation, real estate expertise, and the way they've automated the systems. However, you mentioned, I think we may have mentioned Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae. Can you tell a little bit about them, with their roles in the government? And because I found out as a practitioner in the field every day with real estate that short sales that I've submitted offers and attached appraisals or comparisons of, I've got a home that I'm thinking of right up the street from here. We had it sold for 110. The buyer was willing to go to 120, but all the sales in the neighborhood between 100 to 120. Well, the bank here wants 170. And we're scratching our head and sending them comparables and say, well, can you just get it appraised by an independent appraiser? Have you heard anything why they're pricing it so high? Is it for the overcorrection? Do they feel that we're still in a little bubble? Because I know that the prices that people are buying today are in many cases lower than the homes cost to build originally. And so I think they're just trying to set the bar pretty high on when the value is, and then they're maybe releasing inventory. But have you seen a lot of your short sale deals where the Freddie Mac comes in way higher than the other sales in the neighborhood?
It's interesting. I've had a number of conversations on this. And what prompted this conversation was my wife and I were walking around our neighborhood, and we saw a home for sale, right, which is the Freddie Mac or Fannie Mae. And so we went and we took out a flyer, and the home was priced about $40,000 higher than it should have been.
Wow.
And it was kind of shocking. So I said, well, how do they think they're going to sell it? So I started making some phone calls because it's the business I'm in. And I called people, and over at Freddie Mac, they said, well, we think we're in an increasing market, and we think the prices are going up.
Yeah.
As I pushed them a little bit further, they said, well, the inventory is low in Nevada, and we think we can get these prices for it. It may not be that high, but we think we can get the prices for it. So what they've said essentially is, we think we can manipulate the prices up. We can cover some of our losses.
Wow.
When that's the circumstance in a short sale, it becomes very difficult. You need to, really fight with the bank to get it to an actual market price. If you have someone who's coming in, and they're trying to buy a home and they're getting a loan, it's bad news if that house is priced a lot higher than it should be.
Oh yeah, and I'm in a dilemma now because I have a young client that works out at the M Casino. I'm selling this property near there, and waited 6 or 7 months. Now the property's become vacant. It's been vandalized a little bit. The yards all died, and so the property is deteriorating. It's just sitting there, a blight to the neighborhood. And then they come back with a price that's $40,000 or $50,000, like the one in your neighborhood that you and your wife saw. And as a realtor, they want me to sell a home that is so above market, and there's just too many other deals out there. But I think what we're going to see in Las Vegas, and it's important that the viewers realize this, that Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae, these are branches of the government that deal with selling these homes. And when they own them, they call them a home path home. They sell them to a consumer, usually a home buyer. There's usually 30 days that they'll only sell to the homeowner, if I'm not mistaken. So people that need a home, that are tired of looking, that are frustrated, been making bids over and over and over for the last 6 or 7 months and not being able to land a deal, they'll go to these home pass and maybe pay $170 for that home. They're tired of looking. It's still maybe cheaper than renting on the monthly payment basis, and they can still gain a tax write-off. So I think the key thing that our listeners need to realize is that prices tend to be going up quickly in Las Vegas. And according to some statistics I read in the Review Journal recently, the average price of a repo went up from 104 to 140, which is about a 33% gain in the last 12 months. So if you're seeing 30% gains on the bank-owned properties, and we have a huge shortage of properties now, if you can get a home now is the time to grab it. A lot of these prices are so low that they're back down to about the 1995 and 1996. So I think that was one of the things that Freddie Mac was looking at. They looked at, well, before the bubble in 2005 and 6, prices were here. After the bubble, they went down to here. Well, now we've got prices down to 20, in some cases 25 years ago. And so that's why they've set that standard high from understanding. Once these properties start coming in, that'll just bring prices higher and higher. So it is important that the buyer contact an experienced agent, qualified attorney to discuss their situation if they're upside down in the home, get through that process and get back into the market again and buy, and thereby help our community get more homeowners. It seems that the neighborhoods, the communities, are just a lot better when homes aren't empty. There's not vacant homes that aren't being taken care of. There's less crime, and there's more quality of living in our community. One last thing, there is a court case. I think we mentioned judicial foreclosures, and we generally don't do that in Nevada. I'm sure they can do that, though. I think we talked before the show and the camera started rolling about a case, Edelstein versus Bank of Mellon. How does that impact us here in Las Vegas? And
that's a very interesting case. To talk about that case, I would take a step back and say, in Nevada we had a law, AB 284, right? Assembly Bill 284, which said for a bank to foreclose, they had to be in actual physical possession of the promissory note. So if they didn't have that promissory note, they couldn't move forward on a foreclosure. Edelstein was a case that addressed the attached deed of trust. And if you think about this, you say, okay, a promissory note is what the creditor holds on to. A deed of trust is what gets recorded to show that there's a blemish on title or that there is a mortgage out there. And Edelstein argued that when you take that note and that deed of trust, which are one, and you separate them and you assign the deed of trust to someone else, that becomes an irreparable separation and the bank can't foreclose. Now the funny thing is, you say, if you have a mortgage and the bank can't foreclose, what recourse do they have? They really don't have any. So the argument seems a little bit crazy, but he did it based on a Washington State Supreme Court case that said when you separate these, it's an irreparable separation. Now, what the Nevada Supreme Court said is, yes, it's a separation, but you can bring them back together and foreclose. So what happened was we had very little notice of defaults because this case, Edelstein versus Bank of New York Mellon, was pending, as well as AB 284 was in effect. So it kind of stopped all notices of default for a time. It gave the banks time to collect up these promissory notes and get their paperwork in order, and then the case comes out and we saw notices of default go from 250 to 1,250 over just a couple of months period.
Yeah, I understand there is a big uptick in the NODs being filed now.
Absolutely.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Kyle Wallace. We're going to put your contact information. Where can you be reached? Do you have a cell number, an email address that we can share with our viewers if they need more information?
Absolutely. I can be reached at kwallace, that's KWALLACE, at firstam.com.
Thank you so much, Mr. Wallace. Again, Greg Adamore, your host today for Experts of Southern Nevada. I'm your real estate coach, and stay tuned, and we'll see you next week. Thanks for viewing.